Welcome to the Southeast CASC podcast, a show where we connect you with the science and people behind climate adaptation. I'm your host, Michelle Jewell, Communications and Engagement Manager for the Southeast CASC, and I'm joined in the studio today by Kristen Fontana. Kristen, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Kristen, you have to tell everybody your big news.
Yes. Hi. So I am now at the Global One Health Academy, and I serve as the program specialist.
I'm thrilled that you're not far away because
Yes.
I can still rope you into the podcast every once in a while. So thank you for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. And we have the pleasure today of chatting with Hilary Morris. Welcome to the show, Hilary.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
How are you today?
I'm great.
Good. Weekend plans? Anything big happening?
I'm actually going to the beach with my husband. He's a certified public accountant, and so we have just celebrated the end of busy season, so we're taking a little weekend at the beach.
That sounds so nice.
Yeah, we're
I hope
excited.
you have perfect weather for it, too.
Thanks.
It should be good. Let's hop straight in.
Let's do it.
Hilary, who are you and what do you do?
I work for a regional conservation partnership called the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy, or CASC, not to be confused with CASC, which of course is Michelle's organization. We're really trying to bring together public and private organizations across the geography to work together more effectively on landscape scale conservation goals.
And when you're saying landscape, you're talking landscape.
Really big landscape.
Yeah. So
Yep.
give us some idea of size here.
So it's Southeast region defined by the Southeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, or CAFWA, and then plus 2 Caribbean territories. In the Atlantic and the Gulf, we're working north to south from Virginia all the way down to Florida and then west to Texas. So it's all the way out to the end of U.S. waters, 200 miles offshore, and the surrounding nearshore marine environment in the Caribbean as well.
So what are you using to unite all these people together in their conservation goals?
Our main product is the Southeast Conservation Blueprint. The blueprint is a map of the Southeast with a lot of different shades of purple and gray on it that identifies priority areas for conservation across that big region. And it's stratified into different priority classes. So we have highest priority, high priority, medium priority, and a class that's more focused on connectivity. About 50% of the CASC geography is prioritized in the blueprint. The idea is that as we can bring people together to work in the priority areas of the blueprint, we can all better accomplish our shared goals for critters and ecosystems and human quality of life.
So that's a ton of data.
A lot of data. Yeah. The blueprint itself is based on about 61 different indicators that represent different facets of healthy, intact, and connected ecosystems.
Big.
Yes, big map. And then under the hood of the blueprint, as we like to say, you can overlay it with all of the underlying data sets that are used to generate those priorities. So the main product of the blueprint is really that final priority layer, but you can also sort of peel away those layers and see what's driving priority, whether that's areas that are important for rare aquatic species, areas that are being regularly burned. We're really trying to represent a broad swath of aspects of those healthy, intact systems that we're trying to represent in the blueprint.
These are available for all of the states and territories that you mentioned that are covered in that CAFWA region?
Yes.
All that information for each state?
Yep, the blueprint is covering that full area, seamless wall-to-wall coverage, consistent methods and data across that full region, which is actually something that we've made big strides on over the last 2 years.
So with this really large map-based tool, what's a practical use? Like who uses this tool? Who could use this tool? Is this available for anybody to use?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the bits of my job that is actually kind of fun is I do a lot of tracking. So who is using the blueprint? What organizations do they represent? What grants are they applying for? How much money did they bring in? And that's how we're able to say things like more than 2,000 people from 600 organizations have participated in the blueprint, or 400 people from over 180 organizations are using the blueprint, or the blueprint has helped bring in over $190 million to protect and restore over 300,000 acres. And if you don't do the database work to track all of that, you can't have those fun sound bites. So tracking what our work as a conservation community is adding up to is a niche that CASC is trying to fill. The blueprint is free. All of the data is publicly available, and we think a lot about data access in CASC, so we try to make it as easy as possible for anybody to get a hold of this data. That can range from using the blueprint to strengthen a proposal for grant funding. People are also using the blueprint in their conservation plans. That can be really site-specific plans for a protected area like a national wildlife refuge. We've also had the blueprint incorporated into things like comprehensive plans for cities and counties who are thinking about how they want to grow responsibly. We make our data available through a couple of online viewers. One is our easiest to use point and click interface, the Blueprint Explorer, where you can kind of cruise around, look at the areas that you're interested in or that you know, see how they're scoring, and then peel away those layers, as I mentioned earlier, to really understand why is this a priority. One of our users once said, I see that this is purple, but is it my kind of purple? Is it for reasons that I care about that align with the mission of my organization? The other thing that our Blueprint Explorer can do is it'll spit out a really detailed PDF report. And I'm not talking just about a quick and dirty 2-pager. I'm talking about like a 50, 60-page report that shows how the blueprint scores, how the underlying connectivity analysis score, how all of those indicators score, and then looks at threat layers, sea level rise, urban growth. How is this area predicted to change?
And again, the visualization of a map is just powerful there too, right? Because as we know, species, habitats, rivers, they don't care about state boundaries.
Yep. We also have an ArcGIS online hub site called the CASC Atlas, where we make each of these layers available as a map service and have all of our documentation and metadata available there. And then for our GIS whizzes that just want to download the data and run with it, we do serve up a more detailed zip folder with basically all of the data, all of the code, and all of our documentation packaged up.
I imagine that there is a heck of a process involved with this. And I know that y'all have a lot of feedback from people who use this tool, incorporate that feedback. What does that process look like? What's that timeline look like for y'all?
Yeah, we sometimes lovingly refer to it as the hamster wheel as staff because we actually update this blueprint every single year to pull in the latest available data and feedback from new partners. And so we spend probably 8 months or so of the year in blueprint development, where we pick a suite of those indicators that we want to focus on updating, either because there's new data available or we've gotten feedback from a partner that it's falling short in some way. So we pair up our GIS staff who know how to take all of this complicated data and turn it into these indicators with our user support staff. And that's really my role with CASC, is on user support and communication. That's really the focus of our blueprint development cycle, is incorporating those improvements in the data and those insights that we've learned from our user base so that it keeps getting better and better. And then it takes some time to do what we call pull the crank. So we've generated all of this data, and now we need to feed it into our prioritization model. We use a open source conservation planning software program called Zonation.
Zonation. Sounds like a place to buy a ticket.
Yeah. So what Zonation basically does is it ranks areas within a subregion according to their collective importance for all of those indicators. What it's trying to do is build a balanced portfolio in the blueprint where the best examples of all of those indicators are represented in the final plan. And that includes sort of those no-brainer hotspots where lots of high indicator values overlap, but it also includes areas that might just be important for one really rare indicator that's hard to find anywhere else.
Got it. Give us a specific example of one of those no-brainer hotspots. What are you talking about?
Sure, like Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge in Georgia. It's a huge, intact, unfragmented landscape. It's supporting lots of great species. It's a place where land and water come together, and there's all of these co-benefits. Okefenokee is one I love because I use the photos in our comms all the time.
So you mentioned that there's 400 and some users, and you also mentioned that you update the blueprint every year, and you base it on new information that's out and also feedback. I was just curious how you get that feedback, if it's something that you intentionally seek out, or if it's just someone emailing you and saying they notice something wrong or they notice something should be there.
That is such a good question. It's a little bit of all of the above. We do have dedicated workshops that we present the latest maps. We ask people to tell us what's over-prioritized, what's under-prioritized, what looks about right to you, what are we missing, do you see gaps? That really helps us in our process. We also give a lot of webinars, presentations, and then also as we work with people who are using the blueprint to make decisions, often that will arise sort of naturally in conversation. If we're helping somebody by writing a letter of support or contributing language or maps for a proposal, and they'll go, you know what, I don't really want to use that indicator. I'm not finding that it looks particularly accurate for my area. I think we have some better state data that we'd rather use. And we can go, okay, great. We need to work on improving that data in the future.
So you get input every single year. That input comes in a lot of different ways, as Kristen established. But what does that process look like of incorporating that input and then going into the update? It just seems like a lot of work. And are you using some best practices or?
Yeah, it definitely is a lot of work, but we think it is completely worth it. We try to borrow some principles from the tech industry.
Yeah, talk to us about your tech philosophy.
One idea that we've kind of borrowed from the tech world is the lean startup method, and it's based on a book by Eric Rice. And it actually has a lot in common with the adaptive management cycle that a lot of people in conservation are familiar with. We sometimes refer to it as adaptive management on steroids because it has a lot of the same foundations where you try out an idea, you test how well it works, you kind of monitor its effectiveness and take what you learn and plow that back into the cycle and try again. The twist with lean startup method is that you're trying to get through that loop as quickly and as cheaply as possible. So you don't waste time or money on solutions that ultimately aren't going to meet your users' needs. And so that's why we go through this annual update cycle to make sure that the blueprint is staying fresh and relevant. Another risk with landscape scale conservation, we know that the landscape is changing around us all of the time. Seas are rising, urban areas are growing, species are moving. And if the blueprint isn't able to keep up with the best data that we have to describe conditions on the ground, it could very quickly become stale and the type of product that just sits on a shelf and gathers dust, which absolutely is not what we want. So I think that's a couple things that make CASC unique is our commitment to that iterative testing and revision and improvement of the blueprint. And in our current environment in conservation, I think we're kind of in a peak tool moment where everywhere you look, there's a different tool. And our conservation community, these people are working their butts off. They do not have the time, the resources. They're being asked to do more with less to try to understand the ever-evolving landscape of tools that might be available to inform their decisions. If we want people to use our tools, we need to be prepared to help people use it because we stare at this data day in and day out. And that's really what user support is all about, is helping people access and interpret this information.
Are there other inputs that you're looking to?
Yes, absolutely. The whole vision of CASC is a connected network of lands and waters that supports thriving fish and wildlife populations and improved quality of life for people. And you can't have a connected network without connectivity. In addition to these indicators that are helping our modeling process identify areas that are really important for conservation, we also want to make sure that those areas are connected. And we do that through a connectivity analysis. So we use a least cost path connectivity analysis that identifies our big hubs or areas that we want to connect. And those are large areas of protected lands and large areas of highest priority areas in the blueprint. And then we're trying to connect those across the shortest distance possible while also moving through as much blueprint priority as possible. And that's how when we combine the indicator-based priorities that come out of zonation with the corridors, we really get that connected network of lands and waters that's called for in the CASC vision.
Wonderful. I am going to completely shift gears.
Let's do it.
And I wanted to ask you about you.
Okay.
Hilary, you are a superhero in my eyes and the eyes of many other people. What's your origin story? How did it come to be that you are now currently in this position? And what excites you about the work that you're doing?
Well, that's such a good question. I think, as with a lot of people, it's a blend of nature, nurture, and luck that have got me where I am today. And I'm so grateful for the journey and for this job that I have that I love and these people that I work with that inspire me every day. I grew up in a small town in western North Carolina called Black Mountain, and I was so fortunate to grow up in a place with so much natural beauty, with a chunk of land with a creek and a waterfall to run around barefoot in and catch salamanders and crayfish. And so I really developed early and sincere love of the natural world. I'm also the daughter of a wildlife biologist. My dad was in the conservation field for his career. He actually worked in the Ecological Services Field Office of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Asheville. And technically, I, too, am now a Fish and Wildlife Service employee. I just have the privilege of working on behalf of the CASC partnership. So I definitely came by that honestly. And if you told high school me that I would end up working in the sciences, I would have laughed. My passion was always writing and music. And I think conservation just ended up being this surprising thread that tied my early years and eventual career together. When I was in high school, I lost my grandfather to Alzheimer's. And that was obviously really hard on my mom, hard on the whole family. And when I went to college, there's a requirement to take a freshman seminar course. And it just so happened that one of the topics for the freshman seminar that year was the biology of aging. And I was really, really interested in that, having just had this experience. It ended up being just such a formative class for me. I went to college at Duke, and just having the opportunity to be in this state-of-the-art biology lab and really see what science could be was just a moment of awakening for me that I actually really, really like this. I ended up doing a BS in biology and a BA in environmental policy, and went on to graduate school at NC State studying natural resource management. I was in the forestry and environmental resources department here, which was fantastic. And I just so happened to get paired with an advisor who was working in forestry extension. And I wasn't all that knowledgeable about the extension program, but as you all probably know, it is very much focused on science communication. And translating the best available science to managers, to landowners, to professionals who are making decisions on the ground. That really ended up being this aha moment where I can really blend my passion for science, my passion for writing. And I think naturally I'm a people person, and a lot of people working in conservation, not that there's anything wrong with it, would rather be running around the woods radio collaring bears.
That's
and
right.
Wouldn't mind if they didn't talk to people. But I actually really like talking to people. I love the partnership aspect of this work.
Yeah.
And so I was so lucky when I started graduate school. I was matched with a program that at the time was called the Student Career Experience Program. It's now called Pathways.
Oh, okay.
And it's essentially a student co-op type of internship within federal agencies. And I got matched with the South Atlantic Landscape Conservation Cooperative, which was a partnership that ended up being an early predecessor of CASC.
Okay.
And I started my internship in 2012 when I started graduate school, and was so lucky to get converted to full-time in 2014.
We can really tell you love your job. Because
I
we asked
really
about
do.
your origin story, and then you went back
Right
into
back
the
to my
blueprint.
job. Yeah, can't take a comms person's comms hat fully
That's
off,
right.
I guess. But yeah, you asked kind of what I love about my job, and I think on a personal note, just no day is the same. I get such a wide variety of work. You know, I go from reviewing indicators and, you know, having GIS open and looking at imagery and looking at data, to writing really detailed documentation and metadata. And then I go to launch our newsletter, and I write a blog, and I host a speaker series where I get to have amazing people on and learn from their research. It's a really unique role, I think, to do user support, because I kind of have the privilege of being support staff for the whole conservation community. And so I get to just see the best work that our conservation partners are doing every day, who are bringing in grants, who are conserving land, who are making smart management decisions, who are thinking really hard about how to build resilience to climate change. And I get to just help them get their work accomplished, which is amazing. And I think in the conservation space and the climate adaptation space, where it can often feel pretty defeating, to get to have a job that you really love, where you feel like you are making an impact, is just such a gift.
Oh, yeah. And I can't remember exactly how the quote goes, but it was something along the lines of like, a lot of conservation is just conversation. But y'all are doing the conservation. Like the boots are on the ground, the future thinking about where species are going to go, where habitats are going to be. Like, I've just really admired that.
I had more of a logistical question about the blueprint itself. Just when can someone expect for the new one to come out every year, and does it come out at the same time every year?
Yeah, the blueprint is released every fall. So typically mid to late October. Our goal is always to release the blueprint in time for the annual meeting of the Southeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, or CAFWA. CAFWA is the main group that founded CCASC in 2011. So the CAFWA annual meeting is always a big moment for us to kind of showcase what we've accomplished over the last year. So this year, I think we're trying to hit something like October 15th when the new blueprint should be available.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. Stay tuned. Coming soon to a theater near you.
I have a personal hypothesis that I would like to test against you here. You mentioned music earlier, something that you were interested in. Were you in a band?
I was not in a band. I've been singing in choir my whole life.
Okay.
And I still sing in choir in a couple of choirs in Durham. And I did musical theater for a
That,
while.
oh, okay. Well, yeah. So you kind of were in a band then with musical theater.
Yeah, I mean, it's all ensemble-based music for sure.
I have yet, well, I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule, but across the board, when I work with people who are in person-facing science communication roles, they've been in a band. And I don't know what,
interesting.
there's something about that. There's always a music background. There's always a theater background. There's something that like, so anyway.
It has been invaluable for it. I have to get up and give presentations all the time. And
Right.
it really helps to have like a solid chunk of your formative years spent on stage.
100%. Yeah, you just know how to ground yourself, get up there,
just,
do your thing.
I'm nervous, but it's all right.
Yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah, exactly.
Public speaking, it all ties in.
It does, yeah. Hilary, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For joining us on the Southeast CASC. I'm trying to get away from
Yeah.
CCASC.
Yeah.
We call each other cousins because we're CCASC, they're CKISS. But we're all in the Southeast and working really hard together. It's always a pleasure. When the CKISS team rolls up, you know you're in the right spot. So thank you again for taking time out of your day. I appreciate learning more about your life. The Southeast CASC podcast is organized by the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center and produced with an immense amount of help by the NC State University Libraries team. The USGS Climate Adaptation Science Center's mission is to deliver science that is useful and used to help fish, wildlife, water, land, and people adapt to a changing climate.